The sound that changed everything was not a shout, not a threat, not even a slammed door. It was a single, sharp snap of fingers right beside my ear, in a place where billion-dollar decisions floated quietly across polished tables. That small, disrespectful sound landed like a gunshot. In that moment, I knew something important had just broken, and not in a way anyone in that room understood yet. I did not look up right away. I was focused on a detailed infrastructure schematic spread across my laptop screen, tracing the path of a redundant cooling loop that would keep an entire floor of servers from overheating during the brutal summer ahead. Every line on that blueprint represented months of negotiations, engineering precision, and financial commitments. I had designed the system myself years ago, and I knew exactly how fragile it really was beneath its polished appearance. The finger snapped again, louder this time, closer, more demanding. A voice followed, dripping with impatience and arrogance, calling out to me as if I were a disobedient assistant. I slowly turned my chair and looked at him. His name was Brandon Hayes, a young executive with an expensive wardrobe and a title that sounded impressive but meant very little in practice. He stood there with an irritated expression, gesturing toward a conference room where his team was struggling with a failing video call. He demanded I fix the internet immediately, as if I were nothing more than a technician waiting for instructions. I explained calmly that I was not part of their internal staff and that any issues should be reported through the proper system. My tone remained steady, professional, controlled, but that only seemed to irritate him more. He laughed, a sharp and dismissive sound, and insisted that I stop making excuses and do my job.
I returned my attention to the blueprint, choosing not to engage further. That was when everything escalated. Brandon slammed his hand onto the table hard enough to shake the room. Conversations stopped. Keyboards fell silent. Every eye turned toward us. His face flushed with anger as he accused me of being useless, of having an attitude, of wasting his time. Then, in a moment of complete ignorance and misplaced authority, he told me to leave and declared that I was fired. I stood there for a brief second, not shocked, not hurt, but genuinely fascinated. He believed he had just fired me. The confidence in his voice made it almost impressive. I asked him to repeat himself, just to be certain. He doubled down, louder this time, more aggressive, telling me to pack my things and get out immediately. So I did exactly that. I closed my laptop, gathered my documents, and left the unsigned contract sitting on the table. I did not argue. I did not explain who I really was. I simply told him I understood and wished him luck with his upcoming investor pitch. Then I walked out of the room, feeling dozens of eyes follow me as I headed toward the elevator. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of him celebrating, exchanging confident gestures with his colleagues. He believed he had asserted control. What he did not realize was that he had just cut off the very system, keeping his entire operation alive. When I reached the lobby, I greeted the security chief, a man who knew exactly who I was and what I managed. When he asked if everything was fine upstairs, I told him the truth. It was not anymore. Then I stepped outside, crossed the street, and ordered a coffee. I sat by the window and waited. It did not take long. Upstairs, confusion began spreading. The building manager arrived expecting to finalize a major contract, only to learn that I had been dismissed. Panic followed quickly as the reality of the situation began to settle in. The man who had just been so confident suddenly realized he had made a catastrophic mistake, but by then, I was already moving on. Back in my office, hidden deep within the building behind mechanical systems and secured access points, I began reviewing the contractual terms. The truth was simple. The tenants did not own the infrastructure they depended on. They leased it, and I was the one who controlled it. I did not act out of anger. I acted out of policy. One by one, I began reverting their access to standard conditions. Priority elevator service was removed. Specialized cooling systems were downgraded. Network bandwidth was reallocated. Security integrations were disabled. Every change was legal, documented, and fully compliant with the agreements they had just chosen to terminate. Upstairs, the effects were subtle at first, then impossible to ignore. Their private spaces lost their privacy. Their systems slowed. Their environment grew warmer. Their control began slipping away piece by piece. Requests started coming in, urgent, confused, demanding. Emails without apologies. Messages without accountability. I ignored them all. They had made their position clear, and I was simply respecting it. Later that evening, I had dinner with a different company, one that had been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. They listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and treated me with respect. By the end of the night, they had signed a long-term agreement, securing the very resources that had just been abandoned. By the next morning, the shift was complete. The original tenant was struggling to function. Their systems were failing, their environment was deteriorating, and their operations were collapsing under pressure. Meanwhile, their competitor was thriving, powered by the same infrastructure that had been taken for granted just days before. Eventually, the calls came from higher up. Lawyers, executives, decision-makers. They wanted to fix things quickly, to restore what had been lost. But business does not work that way. Opportunities move forward, not backward. When we finally met again, the tone had changed completely. The arrogance was gone. In its place was urgency, frustration, and regret. Apologies were offered. Excuses were made. But none of that changed the reality. The resources were no longer available. They had been reassigned, reallocated, and committed elsewhere. The system was functioning exactly as it was supposed to, just not for them anymore. Within days, their operation began shutting down. Within weeks, they were gone. The building returned to balance, quieter, more stable, more efficient. The new tenants respected the systems they relied on. They understood the invisible structure supporting their success. Months later, I sat in that same conference room, now occupied by people who valued what they had. The systems were running perfectly. The environment was controlled. Everything was exactly as it should be. I returned to my office and reviewed the monitoring dashboards. Every indicator was stable. Every system was aligned. The building was alive, functioning as a complete, interconnected organism. And I thought about that moment again. That single snap of fingers. It had seemed so small at the time, so insignificant. But sometimes, the smallest actions reveal the biggest misunderstandings. And in the end, those misunderstandings have consequences that no one can reverse. Because power does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it sits quietly in the background, waiting until someone foolish enough decides to challenge it without understanding where it truly comes from.